publicly recognize and thank not only the administration for all of their efforts over the past several weeks in preparing for the arbitration hearings. I'd like to thank the Board of Ed for doing so, and I'd like to thank the WEA. It's been a long process. I'm thankful that through the process everybody's behaved in a friendly, cordial, professional manner, and I look forward to a successful outcome for everybody. I want to remind everyone that the process is confidential. Best and finals have been submitted by both sides. There should not and will not be any public communications about any of the discussions whatsoever, and we look forward to a successful outcome sometime in early January. So, with that, I'd like to move on to the December 15th budget review and study session. Gary?
Thank you, Bruce. Good afternoon, and I'd echo what Bruce said. It's very nice to be in this room without 6-inch binders and lengthy speeches. So our goal today is to continue the process that began early in the fall, and as Gil had stated at every meeting, I think, in the last couple of years as we've gone through the season. Today's workshop is not the beginning, but is a continuation of the journey. And if we think back on the work that has been done to inform our early work with the budget, we can think about the enrollment projections and the report that was given in the discussion of that, to think about the class size report, the excellent job that was done on the class size reports, the assessment reports that have been done, the technology report, and facilities that Matt and Ken gave at the board's last meeting on December 8th. Just a few comments for our newest colleagues. And by the way, before we begin, do you all know, everybody here, I don't know, do you know Tom Ford? Tom's assistant principal at Cider Mill, and you know Catherine O'Keefe, both terrific administrators who have really done a nice job. As you know, Jenny has been on leave, and they have really stepped up and are leading that school in a very good way. Do you want us to go around? Would it help quickly to go around, or are there any other? A lot of you have been around the schools for Laura. And anybody? Yep. You want us to just quickly do a quick run through?
No, I know who all they are.
You know everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
They might not know me.
They
do now. Sorry, I'm late.
Another shy and handsome face in the back here, Dr. Fred Repsinski. And I think you may have met Fred on your tour of Miller Driscoll, but he does a terrific job running our preschool program and our ESY, our extended school year program in the summer. And he's a real important part of our administrative team, but shy. So
really?
Except when he's asking for money. But we're glad he's here as well. In terms of just the process that we've gone through, just to kind of set the stage very quickly, I mentioned that in October we heard the projections on enrollment. In November, people around this table developed their budget proposals. Ken got materials out, and they spent time. It's a collaborative process in each of the schools and departments with their staff, with their instructional leaders, developing their budget proposals. Then the meetings that they look forward to with great relish, December 5th through the 7th, they met with Ken and Ellen and Tim and myself and Ann as appropriate to talk about their proposals and to discuss modifications to those proposals. As the cabinet looked at the proposals that had been submitted, we thought about them in relationship to the board's strategic plan. So that we looked at the various strands and how they related to curriculum instruction, quality staff, technology, social emotional learning, community involvement, and of course budget. And as we looked at these proposals, there were several things that we considered and thought about is how does this item in the budget affect results? Because we've, I think, increasingly been looking at results, and I'm not just talking test scores, we're talking about results in the broad sense of metrics. and various types of metrics. We talked about what learning outcomes might be related to the proposal. How does it advance practice that's instructionally sound, as we look at some of the curriculum instruction proposals that Tim and others have put forward. And then we thought, given the climate we're in, we thought about proposals that are, which proposals are mission essential as opposed to nice to have. I know that's a statement that gets, a question that gets asked of the board and the administration as we go forward as to what are the things you absolutely think you have to have and what are the nice to haves. And I think at the very least I can say that given this year, we saw very few in the latter category, the nice to haves. These were things that I think the people around the table thought were very important, and that's why they were brought forward. And then we thought about what are the consequences of not funding some of the essential items that had been put forward in the budget. Today's study session, and for those our newest colleagues, I think it's challenging. They're in a challenging time, and they've been working very hard to. They already came to us with a great knowledge of the schools. They've been studying and working with Bruce and others in their early days on the board. But I think it's a very different kind of a study session. In previous years, we had a knowledge of what our salary commitments would be with regards to our teachers. And given the fact that we've just come through, as you know, the arbitration process, we have 80% of our budget is salary and benefit driven, and of that 80%, about 70% of it represents teachers. So we really have, there are so many unknowns here today that have not been at work in previous years. It's further complicated, and I was talking with Bruce a little bit about this the last couple of days, it is complicated by the fact that the arbitration panel said to us last night that they will likely not have a decision to us prior to January 17th. And so I was hoping when we were having that buildup of conversation that they were going to say, well, we'll get it to you the 13th because of the holiday and so on, but that was not to be. That further complicates that, and Bruce and I have talked a little bit about, at the end of the meeting, we want to talk about how we might revise the budget development calendar that some of you saw earlier in light of this new development. We thought it was premature to have revised this before now because we could have gotten a settlement, and it's happened in the past, but it did not. So I think tonight or this afternoon we'll be talking about that. But I think that it's really so much of what we're talking about today will be in broad brush terms because of the fact that such a big part of our budget will remain unknown for some time. In terms of objectives, in the memo that went out earlier this week, talked about some of the things that we hope to achieve in our work session this afternoon. The one thing I think is to get a big picture overview of the budget issues, and I hope this will be helpful for all board members as we go forward. A second objective is to talk about, and Tim will be talking about, the enrollment and proposed staffing changes. Given what we have of the enrollment projections, how will this impact the staffing in our classrooms? Third objective is to, again, Tim will lead us in a conversation about some of the curriculum instruction initiatives that have budgetary implications. Fourth, Matt will be, gave a very nice report the other night. We'll be talking and sharing with you the largest Xerox paper because the font that we had, I was teasing him, was minus 15. And but we'll be talking about the projects that he and the instructional leaders in technology have developed to try and move technology forward in this district. Ken, we had a fairly thorough discussion, I think, the other night of the facilities refurbishment issues. I don't know if there are any further questions on those, but that remains an issue that is part of our operating budget for the operating and non-recurring projects. Then Ken will share some thoughts about some selected budget drivers, so utilities, student transportation, particularly. We've had lots of conversation, which we're not going to get into at this point, about insurance, but I think we can talk broadly about some of our concerns about insurance and the costs of insurance. And then I think a really important objective from our perspective is to see if any of the board need more information at this point, and thoughts about things that would be helpful for them as they think about, as you think about, where what type of budget you wish to support and move forward as it becomes your budget. And then finally, as I mentioned, to talk about the budget calendar, the development calendar, as we go forward. One of the things that I put in the handouts in the memo that you received that I think also bears just a very, very quick, obviously the board has studied this, the previous board developed these assumptions, but for our newest colleagues, I think the budget assumptions for 12-13 highlight at the very beginning. I think it's important to put forward the board's sense of the overall vision of the strategic plan, and in light of that, to recognize the board's role and responsibility, and all of ours, in putting forward a budget that provides the resources that we need, that continues to support the continuous improvement that's a hallmark of this district, that gives us some flexibility as needs can change. Budgets, as some of you will learn and many of you know, are organic in nature, and they are not fixed, and we see changes as situations change during the course of a given year. They are a blueprint, but they are not the absolute roadmap for everything we do. That the budget provides necessary maintenance and improvement of school facilities, something I know that board members have talked about a lot, and I think you have some thoughts about the importance of facilities, and that represents value in the eyes of our community. More so than any time, I think, in the years I've been involved in this, and many of us have been involved in this, it's incumbent upon us to talk about and to help the public feel that they're getting value for the investment that they place in our schools. So then again, the assumptions that underlie the budget are set forth in the statements in this document.
Just pausing briefly, relative to that, for the new board members, I'm assuming you don't have any questions about the assumptions, but if you do, are there any? Are you okay with them? Okay.
One piece of information, that the board has seen this, but I thought you might not have brought it with you, that helps too, is just to have the enrollment projections, so that you have an actual set of where the 2011 enrollments stand as of October 1, and then what Ellen has projected for next year. So having said that, I'd like to turn it over to Tim, who will lead us through some of the discussion about enrollment and the proposed staffing class size issues.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you. My charge this afternoon is to facilitate a conversation in 3 general areas that focus on teaching and learning. First, we'll begin by discussing, as Gary mentioned, our proposed staffing needs for next year based on enrollment projections and other factors. I also want to take time to work with the administrative team to highlight particular initiatives in the curriculum and instruction area that have budgetary consequences. And then finally, if you didn't have enough of Matt Hepper last week, we're going to hear more about technology today. So we'd like to begin by talking about our staffing recommendations for next year. And before we get into the details, you may recall the presentation we made on the topic of our class size reporting recently in our October 1 report. And I just want to remind the board the extent to which class size is so essentially important to the work that we do as educators. Our class size practices, as you know, at the kindergarten and grade 1 levels are 18 to 20 students. And then in grades 2 through 12, our historic practice has been in the 20 to 22 range. We feel that the recommendations we're going to put forward this afternoon are in line with those practices. In terms of educating our new board members, class size is so important in terms of maximizing the individual potential of our students. The opportunity for teachers to personalize instruction, differentiate assignments, assessments, the opportunity to provide flexible grouping arrangements in the classroom, to have the ability to monitor a student's progress and assess his or her performance more effectively, the opportunity to obtain informal and formal feedback around student performance, to provide remedial assistance to struggling learners, but at the same time enriching experiences to those students who are excelling in the classroom, to provide an opportunity for personal interaction, our focus on the academic and social well-being of students, the importance of being able to provide timely communication to parents, and then, of course, our obligation to provide appropriate instruction to our 504 and special education students. So you'll hear us say often that it's all about class size, and it's in that spirit that I'd like to guide you through our recommendations again for the coming year. I'll give a general overview, and then if you have specific questions about grade level specific needs, team needs at Middlebrook, or departmental needs at the high school, we'll be glad to have our staff respond. I'm hopeful that you have the document in front of you that has our proposed staffing and class size instructional levels for the coming year. And as Gary indicated, the work here is based on Ellen Esmond's projections. You just received that document. So in effect, our recommendations at the K2 level, Miller Driscoll, will be to provide 14 sections at the kindergarten level, 15 sections at both grade 1 and grade 2. That does yield an FTE increase of 2 teachers for the coming school year at Miller Driscoll. But it does also at the same time yield class size, proposed, I should say, class size averages that are in line with board practice at both the K1 level and then at the grade 2 level. Now at Cider Mill, as our students age through the district, again, based on projection, we are proposing 13 sections in grade 3, 17 sections in grade 4, 15 sections in grade 5, and those proposals also yield class size averages in the board's practice. Now that results in a net decrease of 2 FTE at Cider Mill. So at this point, the K5 impact in terms of certified needs has been balanced. +2 at Miller Driscoll, down 2 at Cider Mill.
Tim, I just want to point out for folks that can't see this, because it's just being taped, I'm not sure it's being televised live. That's based on the fact that we're projecting an increase of 14 students in Miller Driscoll and a reduction in 21 students in Cider Mill. And we felt that we were encroaching on the high end of class size previously, and this makes a very modest step towards addressing that in the Miller Driscoll school.
We were actually over these practice ranges in a couple of grades this year. I don't remember exactly which grade, so this recaptures
3rd grade,
that.
you know, Catherine said.
Grade 3,
Okay.
we were over 22.9.
Okay, so this adjusts for that.
Because we had
But it is at the high end.
multiple
Right.
sections. How many sections do we have roughly at F23? We had like 7 or 8, as I recall, didn't we?
Yes, and then there is only one at 24,
You know,
but obviously exceeding the board guidelines.
Okay.
We were also over in grade 1 at 20.9, but that fluctuation to grade 2, I think, yields the same number of sections in an acceptable range for older students. At the middle school level, we are proposing a team structure that's consistent with our current practice. We currently have 3.2 teams at the 6th grade level, and we're going to recommend that that follows into 7th grade. We will also follow grade 7 to grade 8 with 3 teams. And then finally, the incoming 6th graders at 3 teams. So that yields a net FTE increase, or decrease, I should say. It's 0 at Middlebrook. So it's neither an increase or a decrease, it's flat. So at this point, K-8, we're flat in terms of our certified recommendations. And again, just in the spirit of Mr. Likely's comment, just for the board's benefit and the public's benefit, we are projected to have an increase of 11 students in total at Middlebrook. So it's quite natural that we would have a recommended staffing increase or decrease that's flat.
I think one of the things to share with our new colleagues is that for the past several years, what we've tried to do is we've taken the hits and increased class size at the secondary level, believing that our K-5 program is foundational, and so that here you're starting to see a little bit of a shift, and that's the, as Tim is going to get into the high school area now.
Well, and the high school is a different nut to crack, if you will, in terms of projecting FTE needs. What is a very complex model is actually in some ways quite simplistic. You need to do an analysis of the enrollment percentage in each department and compare that to class size averages that are hopefully within the guidelines that we would like to have in our school. And that yields projections about the number of FTE you would need in each department. Of course, that's a very variable number because at the end of the day, you deploy your FTE based on pre-registration that occurs in the spring. So it's a bit of a guessing game. But having said that, we have a slight enrollment increase projected for the high school next year. We're up 11 students to 1,308 from 1,297. And that percentage increase does correlate with a 0.7 increase recommendation in FTE. The high school administration and staff are also recommending the addition of a 1.0 reading teacher at the high school. We've discussed the issue of literacy with the board at length. We'll get into justification in response to your questions later on. I do want to alert the board that, in fact, we redeployed FTE in the current school year to staff a 0.5 reading teacher at the high school. We pulled FTE from our PE health department to make that happen. In effect, raising class sizes in our physical education and health classes. It points out to the board Bob's recommendation that this reading position is vitally important to service the needs of students who are struggling readers at the high school level. You know, we can't assume that something magical happens over the 8th grade year, summer to 8th grade to 9th grade summertime, where these students can suddenly experience success in reading the materials that can be quite demanding across the content areas. So we're going to look closely at our FTE deployment, but in effect, we're going to try to fund the rest of that reading teacher through a request of 1.7 FTE at the high school level. We can talk more about that in a moment. So at the end of the day, the proposed staffing increases that relate to class size directly across the K-12 spectrum results in a net increase of 1.7 FTE. Now, we are recommending increases in staffing that go beyond that in the classified ranks, and these recommendations are restorative. We've made a good faith effort as an administrative team to make recommendations that were in response these past 2-3 years to our economic challenges. And in fact, we had to reduce staffing to meet those challenges. We've been talking a great deal about that. But there's great stress at Cider Mill in the library. That position of a paraprofessional in the library was reduced. And we also reduced a science para at Cider Mill as a result of budget reductions. So the Cider Mill administration is recommending a 0.5 increase in library support, para, and a 0.5 increase to support the science experience at Cider Mill. Again, a classified recommendation.
No, it's a 1.0.
I'm sorry, 1.0 to support the science piece. Maybe if I'll just get through it and then we can take questions. At Middlebrook, we reduced a 1.0 position in support of our technology program, specifically in the Library and Media Center, and this position also supports laboratories and technology across the building. And we're having a challenge in meeting the student learning demands that are in place across Middlebrook, and therefore Julia and her team are recommending the restoration of that position of a 1.0 library ed tech position at Middlebrook. We are recommending a reduction in campus supervision at the high school of 0.8. This is the evening position. Although in a perfect scenario we'd like to have this position in place, we know we have this recommendation for an additional reading teacher. So we hope that this offset can help fund the addition of the FTE to support more FTE in the reading department. But we have found that the use of the security cameras, and I know Bob can talk more about this in detail, has put us in a position where we feel we can make this cutback in evening supervision at the high school, that 0.8 para position. So that gives you the flavor then of the K-12 recommended staffing needs for the classroom, and also to support teaching and learning in the classified ranks. This may be a good time to take questions around that area, and of course, if you prefer, we could have Ann review the special services needs first and then take questions. I'll leave that up to you.
I just wanted you to give a little clarification on the differences between certified, classified, and classroom teachers. So as we go through this, they can put it in context.
Certified teachers have the credentials, they're professional designations that allow them the opportunity to work in various content areas or grade level areas across the district. They're involved in direct instruction with students. Classified staff are generally referred to as support positions that assist the certified staff to implement the curriculum and other instructional and assessment needs across the district.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tim, what is the 0.5 decrease in classified at Cider Mill?
Well, that is a net
Oh, that's the net, okay,
representation.
never mind, I see it.
Looking at both the certified and
Yep,
classified.
I see it, yeah.
You may recall that we were recommending a reduction of 2
Mhm.
certified teachers, but an increase of 1.5 classified. So it's the overall
I
FTE
see- Yeah, I see that
that
now.
is represented there.
I think what we've seen in the library at Cider Mill is that we've certainly seen a lot of emails from volunteers that worked there over the last 2 years. And I know there was interest in having volunteers do this kind of thing, and I know the community was interested in that, and I think it's important to realize that we've seen that volunteers from the community just haven't been qualified in order to handle the demands that go on in a library, and that you need someone who is a professional, and I fully support that position.
Yeah, that really, we've seen a lot of that. Those were cuts that we had to make over the last couple of years, both that and the science position. And this is, I see this as an effort to try to get back to baseline. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, and Gil, I appreciate your comments. We very much appreciate the hard work of our parent volunteers in the classroom. They do an outstanding job, but they are volunteers. And we cannot say, we need you here at 8 o'clock, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. It's just,
We need to speak
sorry,
up a little bit.
Sorry. We can't, just because of the nature of their position, ask them to come in on certain days. So there are certain days that the library is less staffed than other days. And besides their fine work, we are asking, as Tim went through his definitions of what are certified and what are classified, when the volunteers are not there, that means that we're paying certified staff, people who have their licenses to be media specialists, we're paying them to do the work that can be done by a less expensive paraprofessional. And so they are unpacking books and they are running books through the computer. We're also asking, which you may not know, we have put a lot of money, well-funded money, with small technological things, such as a document camera, such as a digital camera. And these small pieces of equipment need to have the wires with them. They need to have, all of the stuff in order for these to be used by the staff. And therefore, we've asked the media specialists, because they have the computer technology, to code this machinery so that they can say, here's a complete package being given to Mrs. Jones, and we have a computer record of it, so therefore when Mrs. Jones gives back the package, we have the ability, and it's done in libraries around the country, to be able to check that material and say, indeed, all of that equipment is here. And so we've added additional responsibilities, and those things we want the media specialists to be doing, but yet we're asking them to do the work of paraprofessionals. So I appreciate your support of this position.
I think another piece is that I observed what Tim and I do along with the principals, assistant principals, observations of our probationary people, and I recently did an observation in the Cider Mill Library Media Center, and the library media specialists are teaching. In addition, it's not just that they're checking out books. It's not the way it used to be when some of us would go to the library, that they're teaching on how to do searches and how to identify keywords and categories of learning and so on. So you really want to maximize the time that they have, particularly when you look at the numbers of youngsters that they're serving at Cider Mill and the schedule that they have.
And Gary's correct in that there is the direct instruction of scheduled classes going through there, but we're also fortunate that they're able to assist the classroom teachers in what we call open research blocks, so that, for example, in 5th grade, when the country reports are being studied, classes have times to go up there and make use of the computers and make use of the research. And that's where we really want to put the money, into the specific instruction and the collaboration between classroom teachers and our media specialists.
Right. You said you're glad to see the support of it. Putting it in context and just, again, recognizing the challenges that we have in front of us, and speaking personally, yes, it seems like it's logical to support this, but who knows what's going to happen later down in the budget process, and hopefully we can continue to afford to support it. So.
I agree.
With regard to the paraprofessional in the science department, how many do you currently have, or did you eliminate the
It's
only one?
completely gone.
So this would be going from 0 back
Yes,
to
so
1.
now Kevin Meehan, the resource
Kevin's the
teacher,
whole-
is
the whole-
he's the
whole
setting
deal.
it up, he's the breaking it down, and as you can just imagine,
Yeah.
in between classes, he's got to do that so that he can roll into the next lab experience, which is something that is kind of tough to do. It's sort of like serving breakfast, dinner, and lunch, one after the other. And you can imagine that we can, you can do that efficiently to only some extent,
Yeah.
without decreasing the educational experiences of the children.
Thank you.
And help keep the 4th graders out of the mud during river
Yeah.
walk.
Most
That's what I was
important.
chuckling at.
We have cut back on the gifted program over the last 2 years, and that has really been transferred now to the teachers through differentiated education. Has that been working out? And is that an area that you've considered?
I'll let the K-8 principals respond.
It's certainly something we considered, but as with all things, we had to prioritize, and our priority is with the lab technician at this point in time to move technology forward. And I'd be glad to give you illustrations of why, if you're interested.
I agree with Julia. Once it left the budget, we put a lot of effort, professional development, collaborative time into teachers sharing best practice to make sure that we were able to differentiate. Am I sorry to say to especially incoming parents who want to know about our gifted and talented program that we don't necessarily have one that's intact, but I feel very comfortable that that we provide that. And actually, Gary and I had a conversation with a parent who came into the district from another state looking for that, and we were able to show that parent how the classroom teacher was taking care of that within the confines. If it was a different budget season, would we love to have that program back in place? Yes, but
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, at this time, we can hear from Ann. She'll summarize the staffing needs and special services, the recommendation for next year.
We're requesting an additional preschool teacher to add a 4th class. I know the board has heard a lot about preschool, the board has heard a lot about preschool and how pleased we are under Fred's leadership that the preschool has grown to be such a vibrant and important part of our program. It's always good news, bad news. The good news is the program has generated a wonderful response. Birth to 3 has become an important referral source for us, and we are anticipating increased needs for this year and certainly for next year. Best practice tells us we need to have typical peers, hopefully in a 1-to-1 ratio with our special needs students, and to that end we are requesting an additional teacher. The 3 classrooms will not serve the students as well as we think we need to serve them. In addition, and the high school and I are coming forward requesting additional social work time. We have a very skilled social worker in Kim Zemo at the high school. She's one social worker for the entire school. And we do feel that given the needs of the high school and the students, and the ability to be responsive to parents, to teachers, to students, that we are requesting a 0.4 additional social worker. We're also finding increased numbers of students with hearing impairments in the district, and I think over the years since I've been here, I certainly have seen a growth in that number. Those students, many of them on their IEPs, their individualized educational plans, require the services of a teacher of the hearing impaired individual. We now contract that out through a private agency. What I'm requesting is a 0.4 teacher of the hearing impaired who will become part of our staff. And I think the advantage is always that when someone is part of our own team, we're able to develop really well integrated programs for the students. So I am making that request as well. We've also found a need to increase the services of our school psychologist, who is, as you know, our school psychologists provide mandated counseling. They perform all the initial evaluations and the triennial evaluations for our special needs students, and they are, I think the administrators here would agree, very valuable resources to the administration, teachers, students, and parents for the many needs that present in the life of our student population. Those are the requests. We've thought about them very carefully and tried to be very mindful of our priorities going ahead.
And how many psychologists are currently on staff? And where are they located?
I can give you that number exactly. We have a couple of part-time people, so I will.
This was for, this 1.0 is for Miller Driscoll?
It's actually going to be.
You're going to split it?
Split.
Yeah.
Split around 7.9 was in the budget for 11-12.
So you're gonna go to 8.9?
We'd like to, yes.
And how many preschoolers are there now?
Well, it's.
I know it's a moving target.
No, it's funny because I just asked that to Fred, because Fred's always got a spreadsheet with him of some variety or another. So I said, I ran over and I said, Fred, could I have your current numbers? And he said, well, it just changed, an hour ago. I said, don't get technical, just. Our projection, Fred's projection, as of February 2012, because he knows who's coming through birth to 3, is that there will be 83 students needing services in preschool. 37 of those will be students with IEPs, 37 will be peer models, and we have 9 students who are not part of the program, but they come in for what we call itinerant services, speech, OT, and PT. They're probably in a community preschool and they come to us for services. But we need to program for 83.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit about where you're going to physically locate that 3rd classroom?
I'm not sure where that 4th class.
Or 4th classroom, okay.
Gary's moving out. Can you, if you know, if not, that's fine, can you talk to our enrollments relative to surrounding towns and how that might look?
Our preschool enrollment? I don't know, Fred, can you address that, where we are relative to other towns?
I don't have specific figures.
Yeah.
That would be,
We could
it'd be hard to
certainly-
compare apples to apples with different populations in the towns.
I could certainly get that if you would like me to.
I know in total, our special education population is typically a similar percentage, 10 to 11%
Right.
of the total population, which is the same as
I'm just looking to see if
other
there's any trending happening.
I
Um,
think as I speak with fellow directors, and we meet once a month, the growth in preschool in neighboring towns is commensurate with our growth. We're not unique in that.
Yeah, if, through those conversations, if you can get any more data, that would be,
Sure,
that would be helpful.
absolutely.
And then
Maybe.
the other question tied to that is, how is our staffing relative to other towns as well for, you know, trying to compare apples to
Okay,
apples?
we certainly can get that for you. I don't have that, but I'll be glad to get that.
My
We
assumption
might be able
is-
to get that from the strategic school profiles. I think it separates out special ed staff.
Yeah, I don't know for preschool though, but I can, whatever you want me to get, we can.
My assumption is it's right in line, but it would be
Yeah, I
nice to be able
think
to show that.
it'd be pretty fun. By the way, speaking of special education, I didn't get a chance to introduce Heidi Carlin, who is our Assistant Director of Special Services and terrific member of our team, very, very capable, and has been a wonderful addition over the last several years to our team.
I'd like to make one more comment about the special education staffing request. The .4 hearing impaired teacher is actually budget neutral because
Right.
up till now, we've been contracting, so we're reducing the outside contracting line
Right.
and increasing. I think the outside contracting line was actually a little larger than
Right.
having the .4 teacher. So it'll be
I
budget neutral.
basically, right, basically wanted to take those funds and use them so that we could have our own teacher.
Can you
And-
somehow, as we go forward, capture that note and keep it so we don't forget it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And do you take in typical peer students throughout the year, or do they only go from September to June?
No, Fred, you take them in on a rolling basis.
Yes,
Right.
Basis as well.
as the special population of special needs students increases, we also increase our peer model.
And what's our tuition rate at this time?
$3,600.
And do you know what the average tuition would be for preschools in the community?
I believe that we are at the low end of the range.
But I think it's important to point out the length of the day is different too, and some of the.
It's much shorter or
Private, our
shorter?
day would be shorter than some of the private community preschools.
Like there's no opportunity for lunch at our,
Right.
No, our students do have lunch.
they do have lunch.
They
Oh.
I never.
Do the peer models and the tuition cover the cost of the preschool in any way, or what's the relationship?
Do we break even with
I-
them, or?
I haven't done that analysis, but I doubt it.
I'd like to know that.
I know, and I don't know if it's the case right now, but I know that a number of years back, we were struggling to get enough
Right.
students in, and we had to keep it low at the time. I don't know if there's a waiting list now of people waiting to get in that would allow us to increase the tuition, or if we're still struggling to get enough students. That would,
We have a small waiting list.
okay.
Yeah. Understanding what the cost is to us would be helpful
Yeah.
to justify the expense. And then understanding, obviously, that we don't always have a waiting
Well,
list.
the most important thing is that we get the proper
Completely agree.
ratio, and we try to strike a
Right.
balance to, offset as much of the cost as possible.
Right. We're just trying to,
Because I don't think we'll ever be able to charge enough to offset the
No,
cost
no.
if you're
We're just trying to frame the
employ
message.
certified professionals and whatnot.
Right, right.
And we have raised it over the
Yeah,
past
we
couple
have.
of
Over
years.
the past couple of
We've
years, we've
edged
been
it up
raising.
slowly.
great, thank you.
Well, that addresses the staffing recommendations. In the board's budget assumptions, we've already spoken to the goal of maintaining board-approved class size practices. The assumptions also speak to our obligation to provide a rigorous, relevant curriculum that uses best practices in instruction and assessment. What I tried to do was go through the budget requests across the buildings and defined for the board generalized categories of need that will result, and I realize we're very much on the front end of this process, but these generalized categories would result in budgetary requests for funding to support the need. The first is, and you've heard a little bit about this already, is support of our literacy programs across the schools, and in fact, we talked about the recommendation for additional funding at the high school level, but you will, at the point at which you receive the budget from Ken, you'll see that there's a need across the schools for additional instructional materials to support reading instruction. Whether that's nonfiction, fiction-based text materials, et cetera, support of remedial reading programs, things of that nature. The second broad-based category is our obligation to implement the scientific research-based interventions across the district. We're using a wide range of approaches to facilitate that process, and the real initiative that's in place as we speak, we're into the second year now of trying to do the research and development on the implementation of a data warehousing system, RTI Studio. You heard Matt talk about that briefly in his presentation last week. And we're very excited about how the use of this tool will allow students to diagnose, identify those students who have needs, instructional needs, to identify appropriate interventions, and then to monitor their performance through benchmark assessments and such, and it can all be tracked through the product. So we'll talk more about that in the coming months. You will be seeing new textbook requests, the most significant of which is a request for a new series in world language, and we've decided in our effort to be fiscally responsible to phase that in. So we're looking to adopt that textbook in grades 6, 9, and 10 for the coming year. We also have a significant textbook request in the area of the discrete pre-calc course at the high school, and also textbook requests for new courses that are recommended at the high school. And in fact, Bob and his team are recommending 2 courses, advanced placement economics being one, and I think that's been on the board almost my entire principalship. So like the World Language Lab, we haven't given up hope. So we're excited about the opportunity to provide that experience to students in the coming year, and also a timely recommendation, particularly around our need to provide 21st century skill type instructional environments for our students, a course recommendation in our business department in web design. We continue to try to request funding for curriculum development. As you know, we're heavily into the mapping process, but we still have a long way to go. We've been able to map our curricula in the areas of math and science, in science and social studies, K-12, but we need to move forward. Next department area on the list is English Language Arts. So you'll see funding for curriculum development, not only to map our courses existing, but also to evolve our courses to make sure that we're, again, implementing best practices in instruction and assessment. We also have to be responsive, and we need to educate the board more about the recently adopted Common Core state standards in language arts and mathematics. You may have heard about this in your travels around the state, the CAVE conferences, etc. Our teams of language arts, English, and math teachers are working very hard on being responsive to the new standards. The long-term concern, or need I should say, probably a better word, is that the state of Connecticut will be implementing new assessments in the 2014-2015 school year in lieu of the Connecticut Mastery Tests and the Connecticut Academic Performance Tests. So we have to get going now to help prepare our students for these tests that will be based on the state Common Core state standards in the coming years. Another state-mandated initiative is the development of student success plans. And we had thought initially that this initiative was going to begin with grade 6 and follow students through their phased-in approach, but lo and behold, it's a mandate that obligates us to provide these plans for all students in grades 6 through 12 beginning next school year. So Bob and his team, Julia and her team, have been already fast at work, working particularly with their guidance departments on the need to develop these plans. There's proposals for summer curriculum work to support that, and we've had to recommend and in fact have already moved on the need to provide Naviance exposure to students, not only at the high school, which has been a wonderful tool to support students in their goal setting and planning for post-high school experiences, but now we are recommending and have decided to implement the use of Naviance at the middle school level. And then finally...
Can you speak to the state funding that's provided for that? Next item.
That'd be a hard 0. The professional development and training, we're always seeking the board's support. You heard Catherine allude earlier to the need to provide training to her staff in terms of enrichment-based experiences in the classroom. But you know, these mandates and initiatives and efforts, mapping, they all come with training needs, technology. So you know, this is the important need that we have to provide our teachers, both certified and classified, with up-to-date training so that we know that we're involved in instruction that is consistent with what we hope for the Wilton Public Schools. So again, 7 broad-based categories. It certainly is only a microcosm of the entire picture across curriculum instruction, but I thought it might be useful to frame our conversation around these areas, because again, I think you'll find when you receive the draft budget proposal in January that there'll be some requests here that will require some significant funding. So I'd be happy to take your questions on any of these areas at this time.
Let's go one by one. Are there any questions on the literacy programs? What about SRBI?
I just have a comment on that. I think it was about a year ago I had the opportunity to go in and watch the team as they worked with the instrument, with the program, and I think it would be useful for the new board members to have that opportunity too.
Okay.
That was one of the most
It was
exciting things I had
fascinating.
seen for this
Yeah.
district. I mean, I was just
That'd be really helpful.
Yeah,
excited about it. Just wondering, how far along is the buildup of the data?
Well, first, I want to commend the work of Leslie Pearson and Tom Ford, who's with us here, Kevin Welch at Middlebrook, and Maria Coleman at the high school in serving as a team of administrators from day one in the development of this product, working with the vendor that's overseeing the RTI Studio product. We're 2.5 years into the work now, and we have now, in effect, I would say we're implementing the use of the product in a phased-in manner. We're at different levels of implementation at the different schools. I think Miller Driscoll is probably out in front in terms of implementation, and Leslie and her team are using RTI Studio to, again, identify students of need, to recommend interventions, to look at various assessments, and then to monitor progress and how students are proceeding. We're slowly rolling out the product at Cider Mill, Middlebrook, and the high school. The new curriculum director has been pushing very hard. I've been known to do that, raised high expectations. I could see the faces of this team of 4 when I took over. Arlene Gottesman certainly did wonderful work in developing the product with the team, but now it's time to get going and get it out there. And we've been running, and you know, it's one of, I think, in the spirit of the way we operate here in Wilton, we tend to be conservative in our approach. You know, our idea is let's make sure we're right before we roll it out. Because I think the most important factor in this, and please join in, Matt and others, we need to know that this product's going to work successfully with our teachers. And if we are not prepared and roll this out in a way where teachers experience frustration in what is a demanding environment, using technology to leverage our practice of monitoring instruction and assessment, we better be ready and we better be right when we roll it out to our teachers, because they'll experience a great deal of frustration and it can lead to problems. So I think we've had a conservative approach, it's the right approach, and we are now at a point where you're going to see evidence that it's being used across schools. I know Kevin's been working with teachers of language arts team leaders in the math department in Middlebrook. Maria just met yesterday with the English and math departments at the high school. Tom's been working very closely with the grade level teams at Cider Mill. So we're there. Matt, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think I would just echo your comments about, you know, taking our time and getting it right, because I know in speaking with Tom and Kevin, they want the teachers to have the confidence that the data is correct, that the data displays in a way that's really useful to them as a teacher. And those of you who've seen it can see how powerful it is to have that visual display right away to know which students need intervention, and you can see where the progress is. You can see the progress line depending on some of the reports. Is there anything you would add, Tom?
No, you know, I think like Matt said, we really want to make sure the tool is in a place where it's going to be, you know, user-friendly for teachers. So, you know, we've really taken a gradual rollout approach, and certain aspects of the tools teachers are using now. And then as, you know, working with Matt and the rest of the team, as we feel comfortable and we're in a place to roll out more of the more complex parts of the tool, we'll do that going forward, you know, under, you know, Tim's direction and certainly with Matt's help.
I sat in with Maria, and they were having a data team meeting yesterday in this room before our other later meeting. And Maria was facilitating a conversation with language arts teachers and administrators. Kevin was at his table, talking about how the RTI Studio product, and I made a note to get a time, I'll work with Molly and Matt, or Tim, to get a time that's convenient for the new board members and any other comers. But to listen to how the product, the RTI Studio that they've been working on, how it will enable teachers to get lists that are very clear and explicit, as someone said, about which students are going to need some work in reading, and particularly what areas, as you drill down, what type of reading problems might they have, so that it gives the teacher an incredible tool that will hopefully help develop better nonfiction readers.
To inspire confidence in the board that we're moving forward, this year we included Matt on the team. And he's been able to, with his expertise and also using members of his tech team, to take over many of the R&D functions and the updates that we were outsourcing up till this year. So that's been a great addition. And the other thing is the team recommended that we have a laser-like focus, as Gary said, on literacy and reading instruction. So we've expanded the membership of the district data team, not to just include the assistant principals that I mentioned, but also our reading specialists and our instructional leaders in language arts English. So in that way, we are making a commitment to intensively monitor, identify again, intervene, and hopefully realize strong results in influence reading instruction across the district, which we've talked about as something that's been an important need over the years. So it's very exciting.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. So it sounds like RTI Studio is going to be a key component in the student success plans.
Well, I think you have to draw a distinction, and Julia and Bob, you can jump in, between a student success plan that's a more broad-based document that talks about goal setting, talks about social emotional needs, talks about vocational, talks about whether it's post-middle school or post-high school planning. Think of that as more a whole child type representation of goals and objectives for students. The RTI Studio project is more of a directly related tool to instruction and assessment. You're looking at standardized testing data. If you've been privy to the testing report, or you think about that presentation we made over the year on standardized testing, whole wide range of both external and internal assessments. We're drilling down into the data to identify students who have learning deficiencies and needs. And then based on that, we're looking to identify and train up our teachers in interventions that can be responsive. And then of course that's not enough. You know, Tom Ford's big word is outcome, outcome, outcome. You know, how do we know it's working? And what's really exciting about this tool is it provides at the desktop teachers with a vehicle to go in easily and look at student data to see what types of interventions are being implemented, and then to see what kind of success we're having. And that will follow the student over time. So it's not just the idea of horizontal work, it's vertical work for our instructional team. Does that help? I don't know if you want to add on the success
The
plan.
SSPs are 6 through 12, every student, and we're still in the learning curve, we want to make that clear, as are our neighboring schools. But developmentally appropriate goal setting, track through Naviance, you know, we envision right now certainly school counselors as some of the point people working with administrators, and you know, the goal would be, you talk about articulation, you know, a student who comes up from the middle school, we have a better sense of that student's needs. That's part of the vision, just to have a sense of where students are, what's appropriate for them, what type of adult interventions may help them maximize their learning. So, you know, we're in the learning curve, but I would say that, you know, we've had some training already, and we're taking a, you know, really a proactive approach to it. Julie and her team as well, and you know, we're making our way, and we need to be ready. It's regardless of the funding, we'll be there.
Bob, to what extent are the student and the student's parents involved in the process of goal setting for that student?
Through the SSPs?
Yeah.
They will be involved. We don't know to what extent yet, Karen, really. It's a little more exploratory. We're trying to, as building-based teams, really wrap our minds around in terms of, you know, we talked about front-end loading some of the resource requirements, the financial resource requirements to Naviance, and I think we really need to, you know, make our way in terms of who's involved. The goal certainly is you take a team approach to support the student with all of their needs, academic, social, emotional, and eventually from the 9-12 perspective, the vision of, you know, moving into the post-secondary experience and getting students ready.
And will those plans be updated on an annual basis?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
required. They
It's
have
required,
to be,
okay.
yes.
Going back to
I'm sorry
SRBI.
to interrupt, Bruce. I think Cheryl had a comment.
I was just going to talk a little bit about the SRBI in terms of how it is being used. Tim mentioned the use of the tool of the RTI Studio. What we're currently doing is we have 9 early intervention teams, and the data team that Tim talked about is we have a group of teachers that is they're each of the facilitators for the data teams. But the way we're using it that's really very helpful with the RTI Studio is that we use another piece of technology, the smart board. And so with each of our teams, and each of our teams would be a grade level team plus special area people. And so we actually take the information from the RTI Studio, project it onto the smart board, and we can see how every child in those classes is performing. And then it indicates, as far as the RTI Studio, what are children that need intervention. So we can see that at a moment's notice without going through lots of papers and things like that. And so we can discuss it as a team, because that's the purpose of a data team and an early intervention team. And then we talk together about what are appropriate interventions for those students. We can track those interventions, and over time, as we begin those will travel with the child in terms of how they have done on the benchmark assessments. We don't have the same standardized assessments, but we have benchmark assessments that are key to determining whether a child is making progress appropriate to their grade level or not. So I think it's a great tool because of the fact that you can see it right there, as Karen and Gil mentioned. It's very exciting to see it there, but not only can our individual teachers see it, but we see it as a team. And so we can actually take the information and share it. And then as a data team, as a building data team, we take each of those issues that comes from each of the 9 groups and determines how are our first graders doing, how are our kindergartners doing, how are our second graders doing, and that we can track that over time. It's very hard otherwise to do, you know, nearly 1,000 children and see where they are going and what's happening. But this really gives us that information. So I think it's just neat to see that. It can be used in a lot of ways. It's easier at our level because we have a lot of the information because of the grade level our children are at, just because of the setup, and it will travel with them.
If I remember correctly, when we got results back from standardized testing, it was a fairly labor-intensive process to pull in that information and understand it. And RTI Studio now will let us pull that in and start working with it almost immediately. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can speak for CMT. Kevin Welch at Middlebrook is much more efficient than I was, but just the process of taking the CMT data, incorporating that into spreadsheets, and then the different grouping by last year's teacher and then current class, involving Jim Mazzara, central office, and helping to reorganize that. And then, printing those spreadsheets for teachers. It was a very time-consuming, laborious process, a laborious process that, RTI Studio basically, once the information is uploaded from the state and, cleaned by Jim, is really available in both those forms, in 2 clicks. So just the efficiency and the ease of which to see the information is impressive.
Right. It seemed to me that, our time requirements aren't dropping because we're then applying that time to better understanding the information, which goes back into curriculum instruction.
Yeah.
That is
So
such a
I would
key
I
point
would just
because of the-
add one more point about the data too, is that, when teachers collect their own data for their class, like the Pontus and Pinnell score, they can now publish their own data. It used to be a lot of times, they would take it by hand, take it from the sheet that they were collecting the assessment, then put it by pencil somewhere, then put it into a spreadsheet, save it on a flash drive, bring that flash drive to someone, compile all that data. Now they can actually just log on to the network, put that data in, double check the data that it's correct, and then publish it, and that data is in the system and being tracked and flagged.
And you can do comparative analysis too, if you want to see how different assessments and kind of compare performance from CMT to Fountas and Pinnell and so forth. And again, just in a few
Right.
clicks, which increases efficiency.
If I remember too, it's a local company, isn't it?
They're out of Greenwich.
And then, if I recall as well, the information goes into a database, but that's a proprietary database, isn't it?
We own the data. The database is housed on their servers, which are
Do you know if it's a relational
extraordinarily
database
secure.
that we can work with and manipulate to Chris's question and use that data perhaps in other areas and applications of what we do?
I suppose we could ask them to export the data, but I think, to Chris's question, Naviance and the student success plans are a different focus. So it wouldn't, we're talking about instructionally, how do you determine which students need intervention?
Maybe I misstated the
Or do
question
you
then.
determine, programmatically, oh boy, look at where our reading scores are in this one particular area, where we could really benefit the whole class or a whole grade level based on the data. Student success plans are an individual student, and I believe, and our success plan gurus here will chime in, are really the student learning how to make goals for themselves.
I'll go offline on it, don't worry about it. I don't want. I know we're taking a lot of time, asking a lot of questions. Textbooks, anybody have any questions on those? The only question I had was, can you quickly explain to the new folks the process you go through to pick textbooks?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I was going to give a broad-based answer. I defer.
No, go ahead.
There's actually...
He said quick, he'll go. No.
It's actually a board-approved process that we follow. We need to... Typically, we have teams of teachers that go in and do the analysis of need, and then try to define and do a wide-ranging overview of particular programs, particular books, make a recommendation. Part of that analysis is to look at comparable schools. There's actually a template that's developed that is then presented to the Board of Education for your review and approval. How's that?
Good.
And we actually can take the books home if you'd like, before you have to vote on them.
Bob, you want to speak to further?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Actually, I had one question on the textbooks. The Spanish and analysis books are just replacing, are they just new editions of?
Actually, the Spanish is one of our bigger ticket items, and those are new textbooks. And as Tim just said, this is really a broader initiative. They've been working with the Middlebrook teachers, and so we're looking at new textbooks, actually a new series through Pearson for our 9th and 10th graders. So that's the bigger ticket item on the new textbooks, and The point here is that they do their research. These textbook series, Run Our Business, we're getting all of the ancillary materials with it, and it's a book that we can use for, both grade levels 9 and 10. And then, as Tim said, we'll phase that in. The other ones, to your point, exactly, you're right on the money, Laura, is these other ones here are, in the area of world language, are replacements, just, books that are worn out and need to be
I'm not sure
refurbished.
if the math recommendation is an updated edition, and it's just, I know it's a big ticket item in the budget. If it's an updated edition, even if it's a big ticket item, we don't bring it to the board.
Oh,
We
okay.
just make you aware of it. So I'll have to double check on whether that's a change that would require a presentation to the board.
One of the things that Tim's been working on already, you mentioned the national standards. And as the national standards change, it has implications in some disciplines for instructional materials. Not this year, but he's looking a couple years out. So he's begun that process because that will have budgetary implications for us. And maybe next year's workshop at this time we'll be talking about that. But know that he's out trying to get out in front of that a little bit with the instructional principals and instructional leaders.
Thanks. The SSPs, you're using an application called Naviance, did I get that right?
Yes, we've already ordered it.
Have we looked at that?
You don't remember that?
You should see that.
His
That's
kids
a
are
good
too young
idea.
for
We should do-
Naviance.
We should do a little preview.
We know Naviance.
We know Naviance.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to take a look at it.
It's really important to
Curious.
reaffirm that was said earlier, though, that the entire state, of districts across the state are trying to figure out this initiative. And I wouldn't want the board to think that we have a handle on what this SSP outcome's going to look like yet. We are very much on the front end of this process, and we're actually struggling to get a sense of what the legislation and the mandate requires us to do. Although we certainly agree with the spirit of the outcome, we're all spinning our wheels a little bit to try to figure out how best to accomplish that. So we can give you an overview of Naviance, but I wouldn't want you to think that you're going to get a great overview of the SSPs. They haven't been, the structure around them has not been developed yet.
But the tool is very powerful. I think
but
you
it's-
find it impressive.
I'm sorry. It's just it's a new component of Naviance, so those of you who are familiar with Naviance will be familiar with the format, but the piece that's going to be in 6th grade and the high school is an additional component to what you've normally seen. There's probably a new tab up there. So you may be familiar with the college preparatory piece. It's slightly different. So I don't want you to get the idea that we really know everything about the new tool, because as everyone says, we're learning.
When do the student plans have to be done? The current 6th grade or the current 5th
The
graders? or-
SSPs have to be developed for all students entering grades 6 through 12 for the coming school year.
So September.
So we've recommended the continued work during this school year.
How was your summer?
We put in quite a few summer curriculum days.
We know, for example, at Middlebrook, we do a career unit, and that's something we've had in place for a long time. But with the use of Naviance, we're going to be having staff development with that. Our hope is that the students will be able to take the career surveys electronically on Naviance, have it saved there. But of course, our counselors want to take a look at it and see if that survey is equal to what the students are using now. So it will be stored centrally and then move forward, and the students will take it each. Yes, but it will go to the high school. And I have to compliment Deb Marino and the high school staff. We've really been working closely together on this initiative, and she's been wonderful.
We're confident,
She showed me
I'm sorry.
Naviance.
We're confident that a great deal of the requirements around the SSPs involve work we're already doing. We just have to figure out how to match.
Yeah.
When I first read this, I thought we were going down the road of developing individual IEPs for every student.
Yeah.
And I just thought,
Yeah.
oh,
That's next year.
oh my gosh.
Well, in many
It's
ways,
like
it
fame
is.
at the table.
It does feel like that.
Yeah, but because that has such implications on cost and the time required.
Well,
Oh,
Matt was very reassuring at the principal's coffee this week for the high school, and Maria and Bob, because he introduced it. I didn't know about it, and so I knew it was. He was very confident. He seemed like there's going to be no problems right now.
he says with such confidence.
saying that.
Okay, moving on. Any questions about professional development
Wait a
training?
minute, can we go back to the new high school course proposals?
No, we've gone past that, I'm sorry.
You skipped it.
You skipped it,
Um,
actually.
I'm just curious as to how you're going to integrate them into the curriculum. Will they be offered every semester? Is anything being dropped so that you can add these to the curriculum?
With the AP Econ, we envision offering, and this is preliminary because we have to look at registration numbers. We may have 3 to 4 sections of regular economics, and we could predict that we would have maybe 2 sections of regular econ, which is a semester course that we already offer, and then the 1-year AP Econ course, which is actually a 2-semester course. So, you know, we could envision that students would take that as an AP alternative, and you know, the goal would be really to offer them both each year, but just to meet the needs of all the students who need the courses. So not alter them, alternate them. In applied arts with the web design course, I think the students will choose one or the other. You know, we're looking at really a model with no FTE increase. Students will choose, they have to meet the applied arts requirement. The good news there is we foresee funding that largely, almost exclusively through the Carl Perkins grant. It'll also give us another repeater for the grant, which will be helpful. And you know, we think it's going to be, that course in particular is an opportunity really to freshen the curriculum a bit, if you will. We talk about 21st century skills, you know, WIDLs and our strategic plan. You know, we think it's going to be a good option for students, and it's responsive to what we're hearing from students, national and state trends, and also, you know, what we hear from post-secondary institutions, that this is a course that is highly regarded as students move on from our esteemed high school.
And I mentioned to you that Tim and I had met, Bob, I believe, with Michael Garland, who's one of our alums who's at Stanford, and his pal Jason Hoke wasn't able to be there, but they have really been advocating for us to look at computer science curriculum as we develop in the future, because of the key role that the computer science plays in the undergraduate years in college and growing role. So I think this is a good step forward, but he had several thoughts about what high schools can be looking at and should be looking at. So maybe next year, this time, we'll be talking more about where computer science could conceivably go.
Is there a quick answer to how we decide which courses we might add? Is there any querying of the student body or parents, or how do you do that?
We look at, you know, there are a number of courses on the runway, and we look at priorities. I spoke to the priorities of this course to meet certain strategic needs, and you know, the AP Econ course, we feel it's a robust course for a specific group of students, but will be of high interest. We've got a teacher who's ready to go. The materials lined up, so. You know, it's a question of prioritization. There are trends in state and national education, and you have to look at those trends and say, you know, what is current? Something that was current a few years ago may be somewhat passé at this point, so those considerations we have as well. And, you know, you consider to some extent, you know, I mean, it's about student needs, but, you know, equity within departments, and try to keep all the departments as fresh as we can as we move the whole high school forward.
The national standards too might, I sat in on a group of superintendents who were talking about the math standards, and how some people are very disappointed the math standards don't have really a component on financial literacy, which I think many would agree is, particularly those of us with high school and college age students, there's a great dearth of understanding of economic principles and financial, but I think the national standards piece is going to drive some of that.
We have some national issues there too.
So the national standards will inspire some.
Thank you.
Was there any question of,
No, please.
of decrease, like taking away any courses? And
That's
no
not
plans for that in the next year?
Oh, generally speaking, well.
Yeah, just generally speaking.
No specific plans right
Okay.
now. No, we have historically looked at some courses and said this is no longer a need or no longer relevant, but you know, not right now, and not specifically in relation to these two courses.
And it's not an FTE increase, it's just, it's a
Right.
matter of an assignment
Okay.
that someone would
Right.
pick up.
We have that tracking. We can show you courses added, courses subtracted.
Right.
But the courses added column is is empty for 3
Right.
years.
Right.
Wonderful. If I haven't forgotten anything else, then professional development and training. Any questions there?
I'm just wondering what the district's greatest need is in that area right now.
and professional development?
I think greatest implies one answer.
Top three?
Top three. I think we need to look at methodologies to make sure that our teachers across all departments, all content areas, are effective teachers of reading. And that's not as easy as attending a workshop on a Tuesday afternoon on differentiated instruction. Whether it's through coaching, through peer interaction, through the SRBI process, I think that's an important need. I think technology makes the list of three. That there's regular and routine needs to train up our teachers, and we're talking about RTI Studio right now. You don't roll out a product of that nature without a significant training component. Literacy instruction, technology, and then perhaps formative assessment, assessment practices, whether it's in support of the SRBI process again. There's a great deal of effort being placed on our teachers to use cutting-edge practices to make sure that they're successfully evaluating student outcomes. So those are three areas that come to mind. The curriculum mapping tool is also an area that requires training. You just can't tell teachers go do it. It really requires a lot of work. And for example, our social studies and science teachers, we now have the tool, all our courses, all our grade level content areas in those two subject areas mapped. Well, how are you going to use the tool effectively to implement curriculum? So that training needs ongoing. I just gave you 4.
Thank you.
I could keep going.
Thank you.
Do you think that the mapping of the science curriculum has actually helped in our CMT scores? Can you draw any comparison that this is actually a very positive outcome of
I think it'd be
curriculum
very,
mapping?
you've heard me say this before, it's always difficult to isolate the variable. The one thing that you would hope, however, that could somehow describe a link is the extent to which that work helps raise the likelihood of assured instructional experiences and common embedded units of instruction. So if that's the case, then your assumption and conclusion then is that instruction's more uniform across the grade level or course, and that would hopefully translate to improved standardized test performance.
I think it promotes the sharing of good practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you have really, really good lesson design, that is, as Tim said, is that you're going to get regardless of your teacher, because it's out there and it's prized and valued.
That's great.
I think the science paraprofessional at Cider Mill helps ensure that there are assured experiences in science by taking a certain burden off of Kevin.
Just a time check, we're 25 after 4, how are we doing?
We're right on schedule. Well, we hope, in light of the fact that if we're moving on, the third area for review is technology, and we are cognizant of the fact that Matt gave a lengthy presentation at our most recent board meeting, so hopefully this can be a somewhat abbreviated overview. But I wanted to reinforce...
Brief, it'll be very brief.
We're not going to go line item.
I was told by Mr. Post today that I would be paid to be brief.
Look at K25.
I wanted to remind the board that the recommendation around technology projects has taken a significant hit here over these recent budget cycles. And I know we've had our success stories, so the World Language Lab, as I mentioned earlier, made it through. There are some great opportunities for the use of technology across our district, but it did take a hit. And our proposal for the coming year is somewhat restorative and does try to respond to that. And I also, if we're going to talk about technology, we have to acknowledge the work of the Wilton Education Foundation and the PTA to support us in that area. But Matt's budget requests, if you were to look at generalized principles around the need, and he's spoken to these issues, it's all about equal access. It's about the quality of the learning environment, real-time student and teacher interaction with information as a teaching learning tool, being responsive to 21st century needs. And of course, that can only happen if you have the infrastructure in place that allows teachers to successfully use technology as a tool. And then finally, we can't ignore the administrative needs around technology, whether it's the use of PowerSchool or Edline and all that encompasses in terms of the projects. So what Matt's done for you is he's put together the spreadsheet which gives you the specifics around the monetary requests and allocations for the various projects. But you also have a one-page summary sheet, I hope, in front of you, where we've tried to, the plan on a page is always helpful for the board, just to give you a general idea of the project requests for the coming budget cycle. Matt?
Yeah, I tried, because I realized, and Dr. Richards informed me that that font would cause blindness, that this is way too much to go over. I really tried to categorize them, because I think if you actually went through it line by line, you realize that there's a lot of continuity, that a lot of the initiatives are really kind of K-12. So I really broke them up into 7 categories for you. The first, obviously, is a critical piece for us is the computer upgrade. As I outlined last week, we're looking to upgrade 368 computers. They are off lease as of July 1st. And really, that's centered around providing reliable equipment and the appropriate learning environment for the students. Another piece, just a kind of a side comment about that. I just received today. I get the state sends out the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium sends out updates, and it's really based on where the future of our testing program, our standardized testing program, is going to be online. And the top news for today was that mobile devices will not support the testing program. So they are recommending that you have good, solid computer labs to accommodate this testing. So again, just kind of outlining.
So a laptop.
How proactive was that?
Or they
a laptop is fine.
Laptop's okay.
Laptops are
iPod.
fine, but
iPads,
iPads, mobile devices, cell
Okay.
phones, and they were talking about being cautious about bringing your own device because you need to have standard equipment.
Yeah.
You have to. It's a fairness issue. Everyone's got to have a fair shot at taking that test. And again, that's part of the reason that we keep our cycle is a fairness issue, so that when we do have to do online assessments, that everyone really has a fair shake at taking the test. In addition to that, we are asking for additional computers. There's a couple of reasons. There are 3 projects that ask for additional computers. One is we purchased an architecture lab out of Perkins grant money. You're not allowed to upgrade in Perkins money. It's only for new equipment. That equipment is actually getting to be quite old, and we've wanted to put it in. It's actually been cut out of the budget for a couple of years now. We want to make sure we get it in front of your eyes right now, because at some point that equipment, now that it's out of any sort of a warranty, it becomes expensive to maintain.
Where is that on here?
The additional
30,
computers.
31.
It's projects 28, 30, and 31.
Gotcha, thank you.
It'll say architecture upgrade. Additional computers also, one of the projects is asking, because of the increased class size, especially in the social studies at the high school, some of our labs can't accommodate a whole class. So they want to have enough computers so that a social studies class can go in there and have every student have access to a computer. Additionally, some of the the IEPs for students require a certain number of computers in the classroom. We need to make sure we have enough in the English classes to accommodate people who need to have access to a computer. Smartboard installation, we're going on 4 or 5 years now of discussing this, but the real critical piece about the smartboards is that because of the generosity of WEF and the PTA, we have some inconsistency here. We are 11 computers away from completing the project at Cider Mill, or 11 smartboards away from completing. So the idea really here is, again, built around assuring the access to technology for the students, and also allowing the teachers to start doing some of that collaborative work that we're talking about. In talking with teachers in these focus groups, one of the frustrations they have is about professional development is when they have professional development in a document camera or a smart board, and then they don't have the equipment. And that came up this morning about the smart board. Wireless access, again, the board has talked quite at length about their support for wireless. We have found it to be an incredible instructional tool at the high school, even though we don't have it everywhere, but the places where we have it, the teachers, even without, really adequate numbers of mobile devices, are still making use, even bringing in their own equipment. And it's been a really terrific experience. Again, that really the 21st century skill of having the ability of having the instant access to information and how you process information, and that's really leads to all those 21st century skills. And obviously, the plan is to finish the high school and to begin the schools by having an access point, whether it's the library or the cafeteria, a place where you can have large groups accessing that information. The fourth category is, I kind of call the 21st century classroom. I know we kind of brought this up last week when we were discussing what are those elements in addition to the smart board that really enhance the learning environment and provide teachers those tools to really advance our information technology literacy standards and really promote really current teaching practices. So we're talking about document cameras, we're talking about clickers. I did mention last time that we're needing to upgrade some of our clickers because as we upgrade our computers, some of the clickers don't work on Windows 7. The iPad projects are really reflective of the part of our strategic plan where we are really promoting the development of innovative technology. And the idea, anyone who's had an iPad really gets it because it's almost addicting. And you watch the special ed students are most needy, most challenged, and you see how they're drawn to it and how they use it to learn and how it focuses them. And we'd really like to have the opportunity to develop some programs in our schools where teachers are using that as a tool for learning. Brain Pop and Brain Pop Junior, while they seem frothy or like a little add-on, if you were to talk to the teachers at Millard Driscoll and at Cider Mill who use this, it really is a tool that allows them that instant access to information. It's at their fingertips. It integrates nicely with the smart board, and it provides that multimedia instruction. And if you study brain development, people learn so much better when they learn through their eyes and ears and multi-sensory learning all at the same time. Much better than just reading or just listening to the teacher.
Okay,
And
stupid
again,
question. What's Brain Pop?
Brain Pop is a online program. You have to buy a subscription for it, and it provides video clips, and then it also has online activities you can do based on the video clips. And they integrate really nicely with lots of different curriculum areas.
So you said it's a subscription?
It's a subscription.
So we'll see this every year?
We may. We at least want to pilot it and make sure that every teacher has it. I'm not sure if every school has it for all teachers. They may have some where a teacher has it as their class. We'd like to give the opportunity for the whole schools to have.
And what does it mean when you say all school something? All school sound system? Not sound field, all school document camera?
That just, okay, let me see. Well, as opposed to all school Brain Pop would mean it's a school-based license. All school smart boards just means it wasn't for a specific grade level or a specific teacher. It was, it goes throughout the school.
Okay, so all school wireless hotspot.
Yeah.
Well, because all.
That sounds like an oxymoron.
It does, except for all, it's going to be in the library, so the whole school has access to the library.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, some of that terminology came from the building IL, so I'm translating there.
Thank you.
Somewhere I read about use of netbooks, and I've seen netbooks, and I've never been too impressed with their performance. Is that something that we're using or we're going to be purchasing?
Well, you do have a mobile laptop lab as one of the projects at Middlebrook. We've actually had really good positive feedback from the netbooks we have. We have a handful that you can check out in the library at the high school and access the wireless and use the databases. I know Ann has told me that even though we had kind of a bumpy start with some individual students on netbooks, that the students take to it. So it really is all about the students, where we as adults may go, oh, God, that hurts my eyes, and I can't type on this little keyboard. But the students, they find it easy to use. They have with the wireless, they have the access to the information, and obviously they don't have the same size fingers that I do, because I watch them typing away in the lab. And I think for some of the special ed students, we had some of these word processing keyboards, and when you got a little bit older, it becomes a little bit of a social issue, that socio-emotional thing where you look different. But if you have a netbook, you look kind of cool. And that's a big component of learning, because you're not worrying about being different. If you're cool, you're right engaged in the lesson.
And we haven't assigned them to students. We've given them to the special ed department, and they give them to students as they need them. And it's really been well received.
The 368 computers, they're coming off of lease, so they're going back to the finance company, so we have to fill those holes, correct?
We typically wipe them and donate them to charities. Yes, yes, they're off lease.
Okay.
How old are our oldest smart boards, and what has maintenance been like for them?
Our oldest smart boards, I believe, are 7 years old, and we've it's a fairly simple product. We've never really we've had components of them break down. We've never had any wholesale breakdown, and the company's really good. We've had a couple of pen trays that go bad, and you literally unplug it and email them, and they mail you a new pen tray in about a week, and you plug the new one in.
Is it all part of a warranty, or?
Yes. But the 7-year-old ones operate just as great as the brand new ones. And the software automatically upgrades itself, and it back upgrades, so even if you have a newer model, the software works on all of them.
What's the priority for installing the sound fields?
The sound fields it sort of depends on the school. And actually, I got real positive feedback from teachers at the tech focus group at Miller Driscoll. They had been a little reticent about implementing them. They didn't quite understand it. But if you sat in the focus group this morning, the teachers who had them loved them. And they just, all of a sudden, they realized that they're not raising their voice all day. That when the air handlers are on, you can hear them. At Cider Mill, they've been typically trying to put them in with the smart board to make that full integrated classroom.
So they're sort of going to follow the installation of the smart board?
Yes. At Middlebrook, they've been doing that same plan. In addition, they've also had to accommodate some students based on their IEP, so we've had some additional ones to make sure that when that student's on a certain team, that they have the access to the sound.
Some are portable and sort of fixed, correct?
Right, but the portable ones, you still want to have an audiologist set up, because you don't want sound waves in rooms like at Miller Driscoll, where you have those crazy shaped rooms. You don't want the sounds bouncing off. You want a real beautiful field of sound. And if you've had the opportunity to be in a classroom, it really is a pretty interesting experience to be able to hear wherever you are in the classroom.
I was going to say, our proposal is specifically to have a few at each grade level, so that we have the opportunity that if it benefits certain rooms or certain children or certain teachers, to be able to project more. So that's how ours will be used. And over time, we hope to add to more of the classrooms.
Just in the context of people that aren't in this room that are going to be watching this, though, those sound fields in Miller Driscoll are more than likely a Band-Aid fix to the ambient noise in the classroom.
Well,
and
right.
the ambient noise is a bigger issue.
Absolutely. And right now, a lot of new school construction around the country are putting them in just as a part of the construction, because even though they have a new type of building, and they can plan for that sort of thing. They're still putting them there because they help with the projection of all students. They help children in different areas of the room, and it still blocks out like road noise, things like that. So, not that we're on a big road or anything, but things like that.
I was in a classroom, I may have mentioned this at one of Cheryl's classrooms, and teacher literally had to turn off, to your point, the air handler. I was,
and you still
I was about,
even
as far as I am from
Yeah.
Cheryl, I could not hear what the teacher was saying. And it was just.
We don't turn on the air conditioner at all when students are being instructed by an individual, even with this system, because that they're just competing interests.
Right, okay.
Do any of the other schools have similar issues
They
in terms of?
have not, but they also, in terms of noise issue, they have the brand new air conditioning system, and it really hasn't been an issue, but it hasn't been brought up as a need, but.
At the high school.
At the high school.
Places.
In places inside, I was going to say, inside, I've been in some cider mill classrooms
some of the
where
HVAC
the
systems.
unit ventilators are cranking, and
Yeah.
it's,
So it's
Yeah.
almost, when you're doing teacher observations, one of the things that we look for is, does the teacher make a habit of repeating a student's response? Because without the sound field, that's good practice. But what's wonderful is when the teacher has the mic on her and repeats what a student has responded, then immediately the rest of the class has heard it. Or the other piece are the teachers who then share the mic and make sure that the students' voices, and you can imagine little third grade voices can often be little third grade voices. So it's very, very helpful.
One more. I've asked this every year, and obviously you don't have a tech integrator in the plan. Could you just describe to all of us what a tech integrator is?
It
and the
has come
value
up in every focus group. A tech integrator is a certified teacher whose job is to model professional development, best practices, and integration of technology. So they are a trainer, but the model really is to be a coach, to really teach teachers best practices. And you can imagine that one integrator would have a rough job in a school that has 1,000 students, the school system has 1,000 students in each school, to be able to get and serve every teacher. So the model here would have to be trying to get groups of teachers to collaborate. I mean, I'm not sure how it would work, but it is best practice. It is what our neighboring school districts do have as a model. Just to have that point person for professional. Our instructional leaders are terrific, but they're full-time teachers, and their professional development is during their own prep time, before school on their own time, after school on their own time, responding to emails and offering help on weekends on their own time. And they're really, without getting them sub-coverage, which takes away from their students, you can't get them in to do that modeling that a tech integrator does.
You said tech integrator is certified teacher?
Yes.
So like a media specialist, that's what it is, but for tech?
Most of them actually were classroom teachers. Most of the ones
Okay.
I've met were classroom teachers who were terrific at integrating technology, and then got their master's or 6th year as a tech integrator.
Are they available on a consulting basis?
They're paid for by their school district, so I'm not certain. I mean, we might be able to get one of them to come to talk to the tech. I think we've had them in the past before my time speak to the tech advisory committee from my predecessor. But I mean, we might be able to get them on like a staff development day, but it really defeats the purpose, because what you want is them in, one of the things that we've learned in our tech focus groups is the need for teachers to have more time, both time to practice using a smart board or a document camera, because they don't want to be embarrassed in front of their students. They want that comfort level. And also, sometimes you go to that training, and if you don't have the equipment right away, maybe 2 years later, you need a little help. And then sometimes you just want to see what the best is like. There's only one Brian Ennis at Miller Driscoll School. You can't all come into his classroom to watch him teach, but if you watch how, it's effortless the way he does it, but if you could then watch him do it, then meet with him afterwards and find out what made it effortless, what planning went into that. And that's what the benefit of a tech integrator would be. If we had unlimited budget in this budget year, we're going to put it.
Any other questions? Wonderful, thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
Facilities, well, we talked a lot about it a week ago. I'll remind the board that the way we prioritize our projects are health and safety first, maintenance second, for example, the insulating of the cider mill ductwork to prevent large, high-cost projects in the future, and continuation or completion of ongoing projects. So I don't know if anybody's developed more questions from when we reviewed all these projects last week.
I do have a question, just to clarify. It's on the gym dividers in Miller Driscoll.
Mhm.
Is that a divider between the cafeteria and the new gym, or does it go across the new gym?
It goes across the gym,
Okay,
divides
so
the gym
into two teaching spaces.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, is that the Miller Driscoll one or the high school one?
Miller
Miller
Driscoll.
Driscoll.
Is that the one
The
that's
high
broken?
school also divides
Yes.
into
Right.
different teaching
The
stations.
Miller Driscoll one's the broken one.
Yeah.
Miller Driscoll's the broken one, the high school would be additional.
That new, gotcha.
Aren't there dividers of some sort there
In the high school?
Yes.
in the high school?
Yeah.
They're
Yes, this
like-
would be in addition to those.
Okay.
They're like big curtains, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Why is the installation so expensive on the, I mean, maybe that's a question for Sean, so if you can't answer
Well,
that's fine,
it's
That's a lot of
expensive, and we've already spent this much on it already.
Right.
And so this is the second year of the project. It's not just the installation itself, it's the project of removing what's there now, cleaning up and repairing any damage that's already been done to the ductwork, and then resealing it and re-insulating.
Okay, so
And you
there's,
see the difference in the pictures I showed you last week.
so we're assuming that some of the ductwork may need to be repaired or
Mhm.
replaced?
Yeah.
Okay. Replacing the auditorium seating at Middlebrook. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean,
The auditorium seats were originally done by, I think they were prisoners.
Yeah.
They were.
They were
My
prisoners.
recollection. They were
That doesn't make it
reupholstered.
bad.
They were reupholstered.
No,
Very
but that was a while ago, and they're falling apart. And literally at the concert, was that Monday night, there were seats in the row behind me where people couldn't sit down because the seats had collapsed.
gotcha.
And then literally, I mean, we have standing room only, but
Right.
then in the backs, the backs of the seats fall out, and we have to replace those. The custodians go in and replace them. In many cases, it's a safety issue. We just can't use them.
Right.
And they've squeaked for years, but that's okay.
Squeaking, we can live with it.
We can, WD-40 works
That's
for
right.
squeaking. It's when you actually can't sit in them, and they're crooked. They're in disrepair.
Right. Now, that number, is that a number where you've gone out to bid on that to figure that out?
We haven't gone out to bid, but Sean has brought somebody in to give us a quote on it.
Are we gonna use the inmates again?
No.
And would you put that project
They're
together out to
on
bid?
Yeah, most likely, or we would at least, request several proposals from different, I don't know how many companies do that type
No
of
one's
work.
available.
You're gonna ask the Board of Ed to sit and seat samples and that kind of stuff?
Of course, if you'd like.
What's comfortable. Okay. And then, I'm sorry, please.
And the auditorium is used regularly.
The
like every day.
auditorium is
Yeah.
a teaching
Right.
space, 6 out
Yes.
of the 8 periods a day.
But it's also a community facility.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of a big deal.
Mhm.
As you demonstrated so effectively the year we had the town
Sound
meeting in there, the
system.
sound system. Did a beautiful job of networking.
It works now.
And we have nice curtains too.
But then the carpet and tile replacement at Cider Mill looks relatively inexpensive compared to Middlebrook. Can you speak to that?
Smaller spaces,
Okay.
smaller areas that need to be fixed. But same type of work.
In some places where, Sean has seen and the principals have seen a lot of moisture, we're moving away from carpeting to tile. We think from a health standpoint, it's a better fix. The carpet certainly has a lot of advantages.
Right.
But in some places in the building, it's just not feasible.
And in Middlebrook, and I don't know if it's the same issue in Cider Mill, you do have vinyl asbestos tiles, and if you're removing more than a certain number of square yards of it, you need to actually do an abatement, so that makes those projects more costly.
Because it's in the green?
In the green wing.
Yeah,
Yes,
green-
the original
green
part of
wing,
the
right.
building.
Yeah.
Right.
And in one of the music rooms, we
Okay.
discovered as we
Yeah.
were ready to retile last summer.
Now, the security measures at Middlebrook is basically moving downstream with what we started at the high school
Yes.
last year?
Yes,
I think you said external cameras. were
yes.
gonna start.
Well, some internal also. Cafeteria, high-traffic
Right,
intersections like the front lobby.
Does that have any cost implications or cost savings as we're getting in the high school?
Probably not. We don't have a night campus supervisor at Middlebrook
Mm.
right now.
And I know when we first started doing the security work at the high school, you were able to find some grant money.
Right, there was
to help out with
Homeland
that.
Security grant money available then, but it's not available now. Obviously,
In the
if
spirit
anything
of your
was made
question, though,
available, I would,
I'm sorry, Ken.
if any money was made available, I would certainly pursue it.
The spirit of your question, though, Gil, I want to reaffirm that the high school is recommending the reduction of the .8 evening supervisor, which I think is directly related to the installation of the cameras. That's an evening piece, though.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Any other questions? Wonderful, thank you.
And I guess next are the other budget drivers. Health benefits, preliminary estimates right now are that since, as you know, we're running over budget this year so far, and our estimates for the next year are based on our current trends, indicate that we may have a sizable increase in budget next year. Obviously, every month that goes by, Ed Norgard will refine his trend analysis and refine the estimate. And we usually lock in a number in February or March, our final estimate.
Ken, we had a question from a member of the public today, an email asking whether or not we are realizing the savings that we expected by combining our plan with the town's plan. That's Marion Gustafson.
We did not expect to realize savings from combining the plan. The town
Town
will realize the savings.
That was
not us.
never a cost savings
It was
for
a
us.
benefit for them, not for us.
Okay. And the savings was in the administration of the plan. It was unrelated, I think, to the number of claims.
Some of it was in the administration of the plan, and most of their savings would be realized in claims.
Those would be realized in claims,
Yeah.
okay.
Next is utilities. The two largest drivers of our utility accounts, electricity and heating oil. As you know, we've done a lot of projects in recent years to minimize our use, or should I cut down on our use of oil and electricity. Some of the electrical projects are being paid for on the electric bill, so they're cost neutral right now, but those are starting to drop off. We're getting full advantage of the original relamping project we did at Cider Mill and the high school. So we've actually been able to reduce the amount of electricity we're using, even though some of the costs are going up. So I expect electricity to be pretty flat next year, maybe even a slight decrease. And heating oil, we're going out to bid. We're partnering with Norwalk later this month to go out to bid, so hopefully we'll have a firm number that we can lock in early January. Right now, it looks like the price might be around the same as we're paying this year, which I think is $3.23 a gallon. So if that stays the same, we will actually be able to reduce our heating oil budget for next year, because we've been, over the years, we use less oil. I think it's about 17 or 19% less oil than we used 5 or 6 years ago, in large part due to the new boilers at the high school that are much more efficient. But at all the schools, through other measures we've taken with thermostat setbacks and things like that, we've been able to reduce our oil consumption.
Does that include Miller Driscoll? Does that include Miller Driscoll?
Yes.
We've been able to reduce our consumption of Miller Driscoll?
I think it's been pretty steady at Miller Driscoll, maybe down a little bit.
I was laughing because Chris got a better price on heating oil than I did. She's been ribbing me about it. So consequently, I've dropped the temperature in my house to 50.
Come to my house.
And my kids love me. The pets are very unhappy. If you haven't, how difficult would it be to do an assessment per square footage of the efficiency or energy utilization by school, both for heating oil and for electricity?
I think that might have been done already.
We've been involved in a project with, Karen might remember, was it University of Vermont or, no, it was some university, maybe it was at Connecticut.
It was UConn, I think.
UConn, you know,
Yeah,
to
where
do
we
those
benchmarked
kinds
all
of
the
studies. And we had done an building by building efficiency.
Because obviously what I'd like to see relative to Miller Driscoll is how it compares to, let's say, the high school.
Right.
You know, based on the work that we've done here in Cider Mill, the work was relatively recent. And
Some
then
of those numbers,
Middlebrook.
some of those numbers are available through
Yeah.
Sean, and I attended a meeting yesterday where through the ARRA grant that the town received, Strategic Building Solutions has developed an energy template for the town where we can take our electric and our fuel usage and chart it. And if there's a spike, well, we can try to figure out why did it spike at that particular time.
Right.
And look at the degree days and so forth. So I think, and the schools are included in that as well as the town buildings and the library. And I think once they get it up and running, it'll be a very good management tool town-wide to show our usage and to pinpoint specific areas of concern.
Right. Well, it could also open up opportunities for us to help justify renovations,
Yeah.
for us to utilize some buildings more in the wintertime if they're more efficient and other ones less. So things to look
We've been
at.
really focusing on electricity a lot lately. We just, and I had reported before that we just recently completed a project at Cider Mill that did another round of relamping, changing out fixtures that's projected to save us, after it's paid off in 3 years, over $100,000 a year in electricity. We're getting another proposal, though I haven't seen the final draft yet, to do a similar project at Middlebrook that will also generate significant savings. The payback time is, I think, 2.5 years, and again, we get, I think it costs us about $100,000, and we get on-bill financing from CLNP. So again, the energy savings happen immediately, and it offsets the extra cost. So after the 2.5 years, we start to see the benefits of that. So we're continuing to pursue those projects as long as incentives are available through CLNP. We can make some pretty good gains.
Any other questions?
And then the only other item I had here was student transportation, which there's not a whole lot to say about that right now. We're in the process of doing an RFP for our transportation services. Our current contract with First Student expires at the end of this school year, and we've had quite a bit of interest shown from a number of transportation companies, some from around here and some from, I got an email today from a company in Illinois, and very interested. And transportation is something.
It's a long drive.
It's a long drive.
It's a long bus route.
They're very dedicated.
Mary Channing will take care of it.
She'll take care of it.
I'm sure the heat on their buses are good.
4 a.m. wake up, bus stop.
Until a few years ago, there were really relatively few serious players in this area. Laidlaw had the lion's share of the market, and they were taken over a few years ago by First Student. But a number of other companies have been making inroads in here. DATCO, I think, got Reading. Student Transportation of America got Danbury, and I think somebody else, I'm not sure. what other
Bauman's
district.
around too.
Bauman is around every now and then, and a few others. So we're having a pre-bid meeting tomorrow, actually, which is mandatory for anybody who really wants to submit a proposal. So we'll be able to report after that how many people are really interested, and hopefully we'll be able to increase the productivity and hopefully achieve some savings.
We're a
Can you walk us-
desirable, as Ellen always points out, we're a desirable target for firms that want to expand, in that we have the bus barn that is really, where you have maintenance facility for buses and discrete parking area. In many school districts, as you know, they're crammed onto the back of a school somewhere, and there's no maintenance area. So Ellen's always talked about how important that is.
We had 10 companies request information on the RFP, so we're looking forward to who's going to come tomorrow morning.
Can you walk us through the process? So you've got the pre-bid meeting, and then what's the next step?
They will submit their RFPs, and we have a date in January that we'll review them. We have a consultant we've been working with all the way through this process who's helped write the RFP and included, our uniquenesses. And he will be here for the meeting tomorrow, and he will be here for the review of the proposals as well.
And do you simply take the lowest bidder?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No, I mean,
we're gonna take someone who's gonna meet our requirements for transportation.
Lowest qualified.
I think a lot, we've worked, having worked in that, and gone through transitions, this is really a relationship business in a big time way. To have someone who is willing to honor the customer service requirements that we have, and the qualities in this town. I mean, this is a difficult town compared to some others because of the, as you know, the topography and the lack of the rural quality of so many of our areas. The open space. And I think it's really critical that we get somebody who will be responsive when we have issues and concerns.
We have very high expectations of our transportation company, much different from other districts. We have very limited time for our 3 bus tiers. It's a very well-oiled machine in terms of lineup, dispatch, by route, by number, by time slot, which we will share tomorrow with all of the vendors. So, we may lose a lot of them when they hear how we have to operate in order to make this work. But we have a lot of pluses too, one of which is our bus terminal, which a lot of the companies and districts don't.
If it should come to us changing a vendor, does everything turn over, or meaning the buses, the fleet, whole new fleet of buses, whole new bus driver employees?
Most often, drivers carry over. They work with their bargaining unit to incorporate them into our contract. That's what we would hope would happen.
They know the routes.
Because there's a training component.
We built it into the RFP.
Okay.
In our early years here in 2004, 5, 6 years, some of you may remember, it was a huge shortage of bus drivers. And the training issues when you have a route where you leave the high school and you go to Newtown Turnpike, just navigating the roads here is huge. So we're hoping that a lot of the employees would remain with us, and they like working here. This is a good town to work in, and we have a pretty loyal group. I think the economy has also helped the supply of drivers, because it's split shift work. It's not highly compensated work, but I think in this economy we've found that it's desirable work, and it's work.
Given the public visibility of this contract, it probably makes sense that we over-communicate between your team and the board, not necessarily that it's going to go out publicly, so that we're kept well informed of how it's going. Contractually, historically, how big has this contract been?
It's about $3.4 million.
Over 3 years?
No, per year.
Per year.
We've had,
We're
in the last year of a 5-year agreement with the first two.
Okay.
And we're hoping for another 5-year agreement?
It depends.
That's what's in the RFP.
It's not something you want to, we've talked about this in previous years, changing, you know, it's like food service, you don't want to be flipping that every
Yeah.
year.
Right.
Just because it is a relationship business.
And it's a big commitment that the bus company has to
Right,
make to
right.
supply, you
All
know,
those buses and
you know,
everything, yeah.
buses for 33 runs,
Right.
plus a certain number of spares. So,
Right.
you know, and if we require them to have a minimum or an average, you know, age of 5 years, you know, there might be some new buses in the mix. And so then, you know, they have to make a substantial commitment. So
And we
you can't
require
go with the short term.
seatbelts, we require cameras, we do have a lot of basic requirements, GPS systems.
4-wheel drive.
Not yet.
James.
We do have chain systems on.
Yeah, but we cancel school on those days.
No, we don't. Not anymore.
Not this year, not this year. Not this year, no snow days this year,
No
right?
school.
Boy, I hate to be the person who have to make that decision.
The fool.
Everybody's going to Gary's house.
That's it for me.
He's in
Thank
North
you.
Wilton, you
The
can't.
president of the
get up
union said to me last night in a very direct way, Gary, it's true that right now, we still have an April break on the books. And I said, that's accurate. And he looked at me.
As of now.
Warm is good.
That's great, thank you.
The last thing we had, and again, I would urge you, if you have other questions, let Bruce know so that he can filter them to us, and we'll try to get time. We've made note of some of the questions that arose, and I'll work with Molly and Matt and others to try to arrange some of the study session on the RTI and the Naviance, any interested board members would like to participate. The last piece I'll ask Ken, as I said at the outset, we've come full circle today. We said that the arbitration has created a need to revise the development calendar, particularly for January. And I asked Ken to, we have a draft that we'd like to share with you and see if we can get your support on making some revisions to the schedule that we had previously established for the study sessions leading up to
You can. You do? I guess I'll start from the date that we get the arbitration award, which is supposed to be January 17th, which would be one day before the originally scheduled date for the superintendent's public hearing, which means that the board would not have the opportunity to see the budget before we presented it, nor make any changes, so that would not be good. So the first thing we're going to propose is that the January 18th public hearing be moved to the following week, to Thursday, January 26th. That still leaves the full
January
following...
19th, right?
No.
No, but
No,
it's
it's
the following
currently
week.
on the 19th.
Okay.
It's current.
No, it's currently on the
18th. It's currently the 18th.
Okay.
It's currently
But
listed the
since we
18th.
don't get the findings from the arbitration panel back till the 17th,
Okay. I just misunderstood what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm moving it to the following week and then to the Thursday of that following week, which would be the 26th.
So that
Which-
cancels out the 19th?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
the 18th, actually.
18th.
So what's the next?
That's my
See, well, see, I have a calendar. but,
We
uh,
moved, this is,
Yeah.
It was originally-
this is a proposed calendar.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to go there. So, if we have the public hearing on the 26th, that still leaves the following week, as usual, the week after that, for any additional Board of Ed workshops, if needed, for you to consider the public comments and make any changes that you want in the budget. And then, from there, the calendar continues as it was before, February 9th being your regular meeting to have a decision on the budget.
Can you go over that again? We're moving the hearing to the 26th.
Yes.
What happens with the January 23rd budget review session?
Still there.
That's still there.
Right.
That had been
Right, that was,
Okay.
that's the January 5 meeting rescheduled.
Oh, so
we
we're,
have one on the calendar now for January 5th.
Right.
We're going to
We're gonna
cancel
cancel
that.
That's
that.
canceled. Okay, now
And
I'm.
move that to the 23rd.
Okay. That's the piece I missed.
I was gonna work back from from the public hearing after it.
So basically, because of all of this, we have now one meeting between now and the public hearing, which will be January 23rd.
No,
Yes.
Yes.
If you needed something more than the 23rd, we certainly could that's a Monday, so we certainly
Right.
could schedule one later in the week also.
If we needed to
if
do
needed.
two workshops that week.
Nothing is scheduled for January 19th.
Yes.
January 19th is the date that we will get you the budget.
Oh.
In advance of the.
But there will not be a meeting?
No,
No,
Okay.
no, that's when we get the arbitration award on the
I was scared.
17th.
we have 2 days to develop.
We have
the
2
budget.
days to put in all the numbers and get it to you.
So this is not a meeting, this
It's not a meeting, no.
Thank
The-
you.
The question I guess
Okay.
I'll put out is, this is obviously a very challenging situation. Would there be benefit in trying to establish with us or give us some heads up on what your priorities are going to be in each of your budget buckets based on certain assumptions, so that we have a heads up on what we're going to see on the 19th, and therefore, hopefully, the meeting on the 23rd is a little bit easier to work through in case there were any questions.
Didn't we just do that today?
Yeah, I think that
I think we
the
did.
difficulty,
We just,
know,
think that's what we've been doing for the last 2 hours.
yeah, the difficulty is that I think the priorities, it's a bit of a moving target, since we don't know what the 70% of our budget's gonna look like.
Well, another question too.
So that's what we
Are
were
we going to know
kind
what
of wrestling with.
transportation's going to look like by then?
We may,
Oh,
we may,
But again, we don't adopt the budget until
February 9th.
early February,
Yeah.
so
Right,
there's
so-
another couple of weeks there.
We
Okay,
can still
that's
go to
good.
public hearing
That's
with a
good
few
point.
assumptions in the
Yeah.
budget,
Okay, and we can still make
and we can still make
Okay.
changes.
Never mind.
And
Okay.
everything
And the
else
reality
remains
is,
the
we
same.
can still make changes after February 9th.
Do we need a motion and a vote to approve this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
See, I think that the purpose of the 26th hearing for our new colleagues is to hear from the public, and then to come back, and then, because it is the superintendent's budget, you know,
At
quote,
that point.
and talk about the revisions, as Bruce said, that we might, the board might say, you know, it needs to get trimmed back, and come back to us on the 30th at the study session with that, so that there has been time after public input on whatever we put forward, where the board can wrestle with it, and then when the board adopts a budget on February 9th, it's your budget at that point. So I think we're going to try to make sure we have ample opportunities to do what you suggested.
Yeah, well, you say trim back, the other option that I'd throw in there is shift, maybe you'll come in with a budget that's workable, but we might suggest you shift it around a little bit. So, doesn't always have to be trimmed back.
Right.
And will we have a regular Board of Ed meeting in early January? No. It's not on the calendar now.
No.
Right.
No.
Well, it raises another question. Is there benefit in doing that to deal with other items, policies, bylaws, anything else? Maybe, Gary, maybe you and I should chat about that.
Let's look at and see what that
And-
might look like.
And at least leave January 18th as a date that you're going to be in town, in case we want to stick something there, I guess.
Okay, we'll put that on the list.
So it's January 5th gets canceled.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything else we can cover?
Well, thank you. We
Thank you.
really appreciate your time, and thanks to all the people around the table here for the work they've done thus far.
Absolutely, thank you.
We urge forgiveness for any teasing that may have been given out.
Meeting adjourned.
Oh,
that back.